Hello, and here I am with this week's East Lothian Courier, which is still £1.30, which I think is quite good value. And this is just a follow-up to the previous video about the newspapers during the half-term holidays. Now I have to apologize for my work shirt here, or sort of DIY shirt. It's seen better days, a little bit like myself, I guess. Now I volunteer for a talking paper group which provides audio recordings for the vision impaired. And normally the newspaper is printed on a Thursday and the recordings are done on a Friday. Unfortunately, because of childcare issues at the time, I can't volunteer on a regular basis. So I only just do it once in a blue moon, but it's something that I like to do. Now, one of the stories in today's newspaper on page 10 is by Cameron Ritchie, and it's titled "Holiday Let Fears for Town Raised." One of the things, sorry, I was just reading it there. A bit rude of me. I shouldn't have zoned out there. But I'm just having a look at this. It's about a planning application which has been put in for short-term lets, like Airbnbs or holiday lets. And there was quite a lot of community protest about it, but the planning was approved by the council. One of the things which I would add is that the local Tenants and Residents Association was one of the groups which first raised objections to this, which isn't mentioned in the paper. The Community Council, on the other hand, is mentioned in the paper, but then they chose not to comment on it. So I'm not quite sure why the Community Council got referenced rather than the Tenants and Residents Association, but that's neither here nor there. So what I'll do is I'll just do a little sample reading, and here we go. Now, before I do that, one of the things that I like to do is when I was much younger, when I was at like primary school, I was quite a shy child, and one of the things which let me sort of get out of that sort of bubble was acting. And so periodically through my life I've done acting. I did some plays for the festival. I did some teaching videos for the NHS and the university. I think the pinnacle of my acting career was as an unnamed cyclist who got run over by a bus. And I also played Dr. Archer, who was an alcoholic doctor. So which I did enjoy that. Also, I did play somebody who had an STD and was using an awful lot of drugs and was getting advice from a clinician. So, not that I'm typecast or anything, but that's the kind of. But the reason I got into acting was because it does help build your confidence and deal with anxieties. And I do remember, even when I was a little boy, when they did acting classes, often they'd say things like, "Oh, everybody be a tree," or "Oh, you've just woken up and you see the sunshine for the third time." And I never really got why you needed to do that, but you immediately felt the benefit of that. You were no longer who you were. So for instance, if you were playing football, people already make assumptions about you. So if you're popular, you tend to get picked first, or you're good at sport, obviously you get picked first. Less so, you pick last. So you're already being impacted by how people see you. Whereas when you're doing these acting exercises, you're sort of catapulted out of yourself, and then in a way you're able to reapply your thoughts and feelings to the role or what you're doing in a fresh way. So that's why I always think that acting, even just for fun, is quite therapeutically beneficial. Now I'm going to read this. Now, now what I normally do is I don't like the sound of my voice. I sometimes think I tend to be a bit monotone, and I also tend to sort of meander. So when I try to read, normally when we're doing the recordings, we don't read all in one big thing. We get little. The editor cuts out or assigns us bits of the newspaper, and then you read it, and then you move on one after the sound check, and then an editor puts it all together, and then it's downloaded. So what else? So holiday let fears for town raised. Fears have been raised that Haddington could follow in the footsteps of North Berwick with an increase in short-term holiday lets. Recent research suggests that about 50% of accommodation in the centre of North Berwick was short-term lets or second homes. Plans for the change of use of a home on Haddington's Wemyss Place were greeted by objectors who pointed to the proliferation of and issues surrounding short-term holiday lets in North Berwick. However, East Lothian Council approved the change of use at the home. One objector said, "Some nearby towns are allowed short-term holiday rentals to become prolific to the detriment of the quality of life of the local population. Please do not allow Haddington to follow this trend." Another objector was concerned that there could be antisocial behaviour at the property, which would then affect the lives of the neighbours. They described the area as having a strong community spirit and said an application like this could set a precedent for other properties in this area to be swallowed up by investors with short-term lets in mind, thereby diluting the community. Although the agents promise total control of the behaviour of the short-term tenants, there is no guarantee this happens in practice. The impact of such short-term lets in North Berwick is a salutary tale that Haddington residents are very aware of and are deeply concerned about. Liam Kirk's application noted that there would be no alteration to the building, either internally or externally. At the same time, the applicant highlighted that those staying in the property would be there for a minimum of 3 nights and a maximum of 4 weeks. When plans were lodged, a supporting document noted that the 2-bedroom home would be managed by a local agency specializing in high-quality accommodation and servicing. Other concerns from objectors included the enforcement of traffic regulations and restrictions which prevent the movement of vehicles, with certain exceptions, during school pick-up and drop-off times. One objector said, "The current chaotic traffic conditions and irresponsible parking of parents dropping off and picking up school children, along with visitors for the bowling green on Victoria Road and Wemyss Place, have been flagged to the council many times in the past. Things have not improved. Getting different visitors on a weekly or perhaps daily basis with no knowledge of the school traffic and restrictions will not help." So that was the article by Cameron Ritchie on page 10 of East Lothian Courier's Haddington page, dated November 9th, 2023. So that was just a read-up of basically what I do when I record the voice. I do know I tend to channel a little bit of Matt Berry, but as I said, because of I find my voice tends to meander and I tend to mumble a little bit and be a bit monotone. I tend to try and jazz it up and to make it a bit clearer, and the feedback I've got from the talking papers seem to agree with that approach. As regards the story itself, I actually I do think that the Tenants and Residents Association should be mentioned. Also, The fact is, often, particularly when you look at North Berwick, but if you look at Cornwall, the effects of Airbnbs and short-term lets have really damaged communities, and it have really removed a whole strata of affordable housing for most people. I mean, you just have to look at some of these places, particularly the more touristy parts of the country. It's almost impossible to, if you're starting a family, to find something which is affordable. And unfortunately, Haddington is starting to become a commuter town, and with its proximity to Glasgow, North Berwick, and Edinburgh, of course, you can see that it's going to it will have an effect. And well, that's my personal opinion anyway. Um, so I do think that maybe the council should have looked into this a bit more. But part of the problem is nobody, even at the national level, has looked into this at all. Housing tends to, particularly for whatever reason, tend to be seen as building new housing rather than the rental side of existing the properties, and the rise of short-term lets. And I believe Scotland doesn't even have a number of how many short-term lets there actually are. So the result is it's kind of left to local governments, and local governments, because they're not getting any direction from above, kind of approve them. It is a business, it does provide a certain revenue stream, but then it does impact other things, and so it's a complicated story, and it's one which I think it's good that local papers can pick up on and whatnot. So anyway, this was just a follow-up video to the one I did about newspapers, and of course the one I did about the newspapers was just one of 10 very random videos which I'm doing as an exercise for me to kind of get used to doing this, in the hopes of doing future projects for the Tenants and Residents Association, which I volunteer for, as well as some other projects. Or it may come to nothing, in which case, there you go. No harm, no foul. Anyway, thank you very much.